So we have about 50 backyard chickens here on our homestead, and the other day I was out collecting eggs and I got 6 eggs for the whole day. It was so disappointing. We were like, man, is it even worth having chickens for eggs? And so we're gonna break down our costs of keeping a flock of laying hens here on our homestead.
My guess is this isn't new information, but there's a wide range of ways that you can raise chickens and get eggs, right? So the eggs that you're gonna find at the normal grocery store that cost $1 or $2, you know, the standard white eggs that all look exactly the same, those are gonna be from chickens basically raised in a factory farm, have no space, and are just, you know, they just lay as cheaply as possible. Versus the kind of eggs that we raise here on our homestead, where our goal is not to produce the maximum amount of eggs, but to have happy chickens, to have a happy life, that are able to free range, that we feed high quality organic feed to, and try to care for them and give them everything they need. However, by doing so, we also probably aren't maximizing laying production. That's not our goal. Our goal is just to raise happy, healthy chickens with happy, healthy eggs.
Yeah, there are things we could do to get higher production out of our chickens. We could leave a light on in the coop, you know, most of the day or all day.
Especially in the winter.
Yeah, because sunlight affects how often they lay. We could get certain breeds that are like, you know, super peak layers. But we have backyard chickens. We enjoy having them. They're just part of our world here.
Yeah, we have lots of different varieties of chickens, and we just
heritage breeds, things like that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the where we're coming from in this. We're not maximizing our production. We're just normal people with normal chickens that lay an average amount of eggs.
Yep.
And so we're going to break down kind of what are both, there's the annual costs, or maybe the one-time more startup cost to having chickens, and then there's going to be your reoccurring monthly costs, things like feed and stuff like that.
Yeah, so your biggest and first kind of one-time startup cost is going to be a coop, right? That's the big thing. You have to get a coop in place for your chickens. And so we've had a few different coops over the years. Before, when we lived in the suburbs, we had kind of a standard kit coop. It came from Costco. It was a couple $100, and that got us going with like 4 to 6 backyard chickens. We kind of graduated from there and built a little chicken tractor that was also in our backyard that housed somewhere around like 10 chickens we had in there.
I think 14.
14. That was probably maxing it out. But yeah, 10 to 14 chickens. We built it out of a used like kids play set, the wood from that. And so it was mostly reclaimed materials. I think I spent like $150 like of new materials that I purchased for it. And the rest was all just stuff we repurposed. And then when we built our current chicken coop in our barn that houses like 50 or more chickens in it, that's a pretty big coop. I spent probably like $1,200, somewhere in $1,000 to $1,200. This was like in the last couple of years when lumber really skyrocketed, and so like I was not wanting to spend that much on a chicken coop at the time, but that's what it costed to build it. So, and you can easily spend like, you know, you could buy a coop off of Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace used for like $100 or $200 to get you going and start there, or you could spend like a couple $1,000s on a custom, really awesome, you know, high quality coop, and that's, you know, that's another option too. So anywhere in that range, probably just to get going, estimate around like $500 for your basic like starter coop.
Yeah, and something else that you'll want to get started is just the equipment that you need to predator-proof your coop, right? So you're going to want some hardware cloth to dig in there, and just things to make sure that your coop is secure. It's just something else to consider.
Especially along the bottom side of your coop. You want to have that really secure.
Yeah. Yeah, so then other kind of one-time costs are your feeders and your waterers. Hopefully these are one-time costs. Sometimes they fail and you're going to need to replace them over time, or your flock expands and maybe you need a second one or something like that. But hopefully these are more like one-time fixed costs of your feeders and waterers, and I think we budgeted for maybe around $50 to $100 for that.
Yeah, they're usually around like $25 a piece, so $50 should be enough to get you going, at least with the basic stuff for that. Another kind of one-time cost is if you're raising, chickens from little baby chicks, getting some sort of brooder set up and established. Again, this is something that could be really basic. You don't need to spend a lot of money here. You can just use one of those plastic like tote bins to get going. We even just used like a big cardboard box initially.
It was the box that our chicken coop came in.
Yeah, it was a heavy duty, thick cardboard box, and we're like, we're just gonna put our chickens in here, or baby chicks in there. It worked great for a couple of years, and now we actually use like a big shipping crate that we converted into a brooder. Or we also, when we have overflow and more chicks, we use like a galvanized metal water trough too, and both of those are pretty inexpensive. We got a used like backup water trough.
Yeah, we found all of those on Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace.
And hardly cost anything at all. You can just use like scrap lumber to build some covers for things, and you're good to go there.
Yeah, so these are just the things that you're going to need in place before you can get started with chickens. A heat lamp is another thing to potentially have on hand. Now, we don't use a heat lamp in the winter with ours. They can be pretty dangerous, and we just like our chickens to keep warm on their own, and they're totally capable of doing that, cuddle up together. But we do, when we get little tiny baby chicks, day-old baby chicks, it is important that they are have the right temperature, and so we use a heat lamp for those instances. So having a heat lamp or two for baby chicks is important.
Yeah, and that's like $20 for a heat lamp and a bulb. It's not that much, and really you just need it for that first couple weeks of their lives. Until they start getting feathers, and then they can kind of regulate their own temperature.
Or when we lived in the suburbs and got chickens, we always got them a little bit older, a few weeks old, and so we never ran into that because they were already at that point we just kept them in our house, and so at normal room temperature, they were totally fine for those first few weeks because we didn't get them as day-old baby chicks. So we calculate that our monthly cost for raising a flock of about 50 chickens is about $200 per month. So we live in what we would call like a semi-rural, semi-suburban kind of area. We're in between like the suburbs and a rural area, kind of right in the middle. So I would say, and we live in the Midwest. And so I would say, depending on where you're at in the country, depending on where you live, urban versus rural, that's going to affect your costs. And so I think we're probably somewhat in the middle. If you live in a more rural area, prices could be 10 to 20% lower. If you're maybe more of an urban area or in certain places, your cost might be, 10 to 20% higher. But we're probably somewhere in the mid-range, and so that's just where we're coming from.
Yeah, and so what does that $200 per month entail? And so it starts for us with getting chicks. So every spring we get about 30 new baby laying hen chicks. And so our cost for that is $2.25 per chick. So we get them through a local hatchery that drops them off, delivers them to our local feed store. And so that's pretty affordable. That's probably about as good of a price as you'll find for baby chicks. If you go to like a feed store or a farm supply store, they're usually a little more in the like $3 to $5 per baby chick range. So you just kind of need to see what's available in your area and go from there. The biggest monthly cost you're going to have is for feed. And so we get our feed from a local farmer who produces his own mix of like organic grains into a 50-pound bag of feed. We go and pick those up in bulk, and they're $22 per bag. And so that's pretty affordable as well. If we were to go to our local feed store for a comparable organic bag of feed, it would be probably more in the like $25 to $30 range.
And that's for a 40-pound bag instead of a 50-pound bag.
Yes, yeah. And even more like our local farm supply store, their organic feed is even more like in the like $30 to $40 range, somewhere in there. And so it's really a pretty wide range. And again, this is going to be your biggest cost. And so this is where you probably want to do your most homework up front, just to set your expectations of what it's realistically going to cost. So chickens typically eat it's like a half cup to a cup of feed per day, just, depending on per chicken, yes. And so you can do some like rough calculations. Like I said, So our 50 hens right now, give or take, our number of hens always fluctuates a bit, but we're going through about 8 bags a month of feed, and so you could kind of gauge roughly how much feed you're going to go through based off that. And our chickens free range and everything too, so they get some supplemented feed from that and kitchen scraps and everything else. And so you can get like kind of the economy bag of just kind of conventional feed for as low as like $14 a bag I've seen. That's probably the lowest I've seen. So there's a wide range and spectrum there. Another cost is we buy oyster shells for our chickens. So I just picked up a new bag from the local farm store that was $18 per 50-pound bag. And realistically, like, this is something you probably could give. We could probably give a lot more to our chickens than we do. I give it somewhat sparingly because we also give them like crushed up eggshells, which is free for us as an extra source of calcium. But I give them, I spread that whole bag out over the course of like a year. And so like I figure like $18 per year for oyster shells.
All right, so bedding is another monthly cost that you're gonna have, and so we calculate around $5 to maybe $10 per month of bedding. Straw or wood shavings are kind of some of the standard things that you're gonna use for this. Honestly, if you're looking to really save money, before we have just gone to like our local community mulch supply, like they have free mulch that you can pick up, and we've used that for bedding and gotten it for free. So, I mean, you can do different things here. Now we're using straw because we get it from a local farm, but you have different options, but we calculated roughly $5 to $10.
Yeah, and then there's really just some other kind of miscellaneous supplies or expenses that could pop up. It's probably safe to, you'd want to budget something for some extra things, but like we sometimes will buy like an extra source of protein, like a black soldier fly larva or mealworms. Especially in the winter time, it's helpful to have a bag of those on hand when your chickens aren't going to be able to forage and free range for much extra protein and bugs outside. And so you don't need to do that. That's kind of an optional thing. There might also be some like winterizing costs that would come up. Like oftentimes, if you have kind of a standalone coop, you can wrap it in like plastic sheets, or you'll probably want to get some sort of heated base for your water to keep your water from freezing over for your chickens. And so we just built our own out of some like common supplies from the hardware store, and that cost like $30 to $40.
And we can link below the things that we mentioned with the coops that we built and the winter water. And
yeah, we have
that.
separate posts and videos that kind of cover all of that. But yeah, that's really it. We also sometimes add like an electrolyte, like apple cider vinegar, to their water, just as kind of helps kind of keep the flock healthy, extra probiotics for them. And so, $5 for a jug or, bottle of apple cider vinegar every month to add a little into their water. So that's really what that $200 is. The bulk of that is feed. For 8 bags of feed, that's like $176, I believe, is what that came out to. And then the rest is, just some of that bedding and just other costs, the cost of the chicks each year kind of broken down by month. So that's our monthly totals for 50 chickens.
Yeah, so what don't we spend money on here? So I think there can be, again, a lot of, you can spend money on all sorts of things with chickens if you want to. We tend to be pretty conservative in what we spend money on and what we don't spend money on, but like egg cartons is something that we don't spend money on, that we just, if you put the word out there to friends and family, hey, can you save egg cartons for me? Pretty soon you'll have bags and bags and bags of egg cartons.
We're overflowing in them right now.
Yeah, so we reuse them and, unless we give them away all the time and don't get them back. But yeah, egg cartons are an easy one to ask for. Vet bills are something we've seen that people say they spend money on. So we've never had a vet inspect our chicken. We have had a couple medical things come up with our chickens, and this is where we just like to be prepared with a few things on hand. And so you might spend, $10 to $20 on a few of these kind of at-home chicken care remedies. At least this is what we do, but avoid any larger vet bills. So Blue Coat is something that we have on hand always for our chickens. So if a chicken gets a little like a wound and is bleeding at all, chickens tend to be cannibalistic in nature, and so the other chickens will start attacking when they see blood. And so the blue coat is great because it both heals the wound, but it's called blue coat, turns the wound like a purple blue color. And so all of a sudden the chickens don't see the red blood and they stop attacking. So that's been a literal lifesaver for us and a couple of our chickens. So blue coat we keep on hand. We've also run into a chicken with that was egg bound. And so having like Epsom salts or magnesium flakes on hand is really good to help calm and relax them.
Good for people too.
Good for people too. Yeah.
And then like another thing we try not to spend much money on is the bedding, and we do now that we have a bigger coop. Like we'll pick up some bales of straw. But like when we were in the suburbs and had just, a backyard chicken coop, I very rarely bought bedding, maybe just to keep in the laying boxes themselves. But, I tried to, like we mentioned, just get free mulch from, local places that had mulch, and that worked just as well as anything. So,
yeah.
So we're currently like in our third year of raising chickens here, a laying flock on our homestead. And so like 20 to 25 of our chickens roughly are 1.5 to 2.5 years old. Some of the previous batches of hens that we've gotten. So they're getting up there in age already. And then we have like 30 new chicks that we got this spring that they're getting close to laying, but they're not there yet. And so, when I talk about going out and getting 6 eggs the other day, like we're at the lowest of the low right now of our production. I think a good chunk of our chickens are molting, and then we have 30 that haven't started laying yet. And so on average, we've probably only been getting for the last month or so, like 12 eggs a day, which just, is kind of discouraging when you have 50 chickens and you're feeding 50 chickens regularly. But that's just the reality that we're living in. Like, a couple months from now, I'm hoping we're in a much different place once those 30 new layers kick into gear and they're laying, and we're getting maybe 2 to 3 dozen a week or a day at a time, and that would be a totally different scenario for us. But right now, it's when we actually crunch the numbers of what we're spending on chickens versus what we're getting out of them, it's not very encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is it easy to have a thriving egg-laying business if a business is your goal? Like, from our experience, we would say that would be a pretty challenging thing to do. If an egg-laying business is your goal, like we said earlier, there's totally ways to do it so that you constantly are in peak laying production. Maybe you get chicks as pullets and you only keep them for the first year when they're going to be in peak laying production, and you're kind of constantly in that cycle. Or you get the chickens that are going to be your best egg layers. You do something like put a light in their coop all year round, at night especially. Some of these things are going to lead to much more ample egg production. But if you're doing it the way we are, where we're not always on top of which chickens are laying and which ones are not, and all of those things, like, yeah, it's not a huge moneymaker for us. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's not a worthwhile investment of our time or even our dollars. We love our chickens. There's a lot of benefits to having them around, non-monetary benefits. We call them our therapy chickens. They're just fun to be there. They're good for our kids. They're both an educational thing for them and give them responsibility, something that they can do to help out. And then just the self-sufficiency aspect. Like, there are things you could do. You could raise your own chicks. You could get a brooder and raise your own chicks and just have the cycle continue. And just, you have them. It's just a great source of fresh, food that you've grown, super nutrient dense. And so just that, really cool self-sufficiency aspect of having chickens for eggs is really beneficial.
Yeah. We're going to be your biggest advocates for getting backyard chickens. So don't watch this video and be discouraged about the cost. I think we're just trying to, set expectations for what's realistic, that you're going to have high seasons of laying production, you're going to have low seasons, and that's just part of it. But either way, getting backyard chickens, like we said, offers so many benefits. It's really like this awesome kind of adventure for the whole family to go on together. and you're adding a lot of resiliency and just, you know, like kind of localized food to your area, being able to produce your own eggs right from your chickens in your backyard. And so we always say go for it, even if, you know, the dollars and cents don't make a ton of sense in the end.
And I think the other thing that it reminds me of too is that I often hear people complaining about the cost of eggs and the price of eggs, and like, can you believe they were charging $6 or $7 a dozen? And I think like, well, they have to charge $6 or $7 a dozen if they're going to make any money off of their eggs, because it's just not, especially if you're raising them in certain ways and feeding them certain high quality feeds, it's just not cheap. It's just expensive. And so high quality food, you got to pay for it. And
to make any profit on it, you have to view it as a business. And for us, we don't necessarily view it that way. We're just trying to recoup some of our costs. Like if we sell eggs, they're usually $5 a dozen. And that's really just recouping any costs we're putting into it. So yeah, it's totally worth it for that local, high quality, nutrient dense product to, you know, buy from a you know, high quality local farm that's raising eggs, and that's a fair price. And so that's sort of our breakdown of costs of backyard chickens here on our homestead. And yeah, there's so much variability there, right? Depending on where you live, how many chickens you have, all sorts of things, but that's our costs. Hopefully that can help you gauge where you're at. So thanks for stopping by the farmstead today, and we'll see you next time.